She didn't look away. In the high-stakes glass towers of Manhattan, where a single glance can cost a fortune, Molly Warner stood her ground against the coldest eyes in the city. Gerardo Romani, the titan of Romani Holdings, had just deliberately shattered a $300 crystal glass at her feet. The restaurant held its breath, waiting for the girl in the fraying uniform to tremble, to beg, to break. But Molly, whose hands were already scarred by the fires of a past she couldn't outrun, simply knelt and gathered the shards with a grace that felt like a challenge. When she looked up, she didn't see a god. She saw a man hiding behind a fortress of gold. "Your clumsiness is showing, Mr. Romani," she whispered, the silence cutting deeper than any blade. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was the only person in the room who wasn't afraid of him, and in that moment, the billion-dollar war for Gerardo's empire found its most unlikely soldier. The alarm clock on Molly's knitstand didn't just ring. It screamed, a harsh, jagged sound that tore through the thin fabric of her dreams at 4:30 a.m. In the dim, gray light of her queen's studio, the walls seemed to lean in, heavy with the scent of damp plaster and the ghost of old cooking grease. Molly reached out, her fingers finding the snooze button by muscle memory. Her hands were thin, the skin translucent, mapped with the faint white lines of old burns and the roughness of a life spent in industrial dishwater. She lay there for a moment, listening to the city. Manhattan was a distant hum, a glittering promise that felt a million miles away, despite being just a subway ride across the bridge. Here, in the shadows, Molly lived in the wreckage of her father's shadow. James Warner had been a man of big dreams and even bigger debts. A man who thought he could outsmart the predatory lenders of Wall Street. He had lost, and when he died in the suspicious fire that took their home, he had left his 8-year-old daughter with a legacy of ashes and a mountain of debt that never seemed to shrink. No matter how many shifts she pulled, the shower was a tactical struggle. The water was lukewarm at best, the pressure failing as it often did on Tuesday mornings. Molly dressed in the dark a polyester uniform for the morning diner, a slightly nicer one tucked in her bag for the evening at the Gilded Cage, the executive lounge where the wolves of Wall Street came to drink. She caught her reflection in the cracked mirror above the sink. The crack split her face in two, a jagged lightning bolt through her hazel eyes. She looked exhausted, a bone-deep weariness that no amount of caffeine could reach. But she also looked steady. 17 years of running, of hiding from collection agencies, of being the invisible girl in the corner, had forged a core of obsidian inside her. The morning shift at the diner was a blur of heavy ceramic mugs and the smell of burnt bacon. She moved like a ghost, refilling coffees before they were empty, anticipating the needs of truckers and night shift nurses who never looked her in the eye. To them, she was just a hand holding a carafe. To the world, she was background noise. By 6 p.m., the diner grease had been scrubbed from her skin, replaced by the stiff, formal elegance of the Gilded Cage. This was where she saw him. Gerardo Romani. He didn't walk into a room. He reclaimed it. At 35, Gerardo was the apex predator of the tech and investment world, a man whose algorithms moved markets and whose disapproval could bankrupt a small nation. He was beautiful in a way that felt dangerous, sharp jawline, hair the color of midnight, and eyes so dark they seemed to absorb the light around them. He sat in the corner booth, surrounded by lieutenants in suits that cost more than Molly's apartment building. Every other waitress avoided his table. They spoke of his temper, his impossible standards, the way he could make you feel like a speck of dust with a single cold stare. But Molly didn't mind. She was used to being dust. The incident with the glass happened at 9:14 p.m. Gerardo had been staring at a tablet, his brow furrowed in a rare display of agitation. As Molly approached to refresh his water, he swiped his hand across the table, sending his crystal tumbler plummeting to the marble floor. Crash. The room went silent. The clatter of silverware stopped. Gerardo didn't apologize. He didn't even look down. He just sat there, his jaw tight, waiting for the expected reaction. The frantic fluttering of a servant, the stuttered apologies. Molly didn't flutter. She placed her tray on a nearby stand, retrieved a cloth and a small broom from her station, and knelt. She moved with surgical precision, her eyes focused on the glittering shards. She felt his gaze then, a heavy, pressurized weight on the back of her neck. When she stood up, she was inches from him. She placed a fresh linen napkin on the table, her voice calm and devoid of the performative fear he was used to. Your clumsiness is showing, Mr. Romani. Gerardo's eyes snapped to hers. For the first time, he actually saw the woman standing there. He saw the scars on her knuckles. He saw the hazel eyes that didn't blink. He saw a soul that had been through a different kind of war than the ones he fought in boardrooms. You have a lot of nerve, he said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. I have a lot of work to do, Molly replied, stepping back. And nerve doesn't pay the rent. She walked away, feeling his eyes burn into her back. For Gerardo, it was a shock to the system. In a world of yes-men and sycophants, this girl was a splash of ice water to the face. He found himself watching her for the rest of the night, the way she moved, the way she stayed invisible until she chose not to be. But the night held a darker turn. As Molly was leaving through the service entrance, two men stepped out of the shadows. They weren't like Gerardo. They were polished but hollow, the kind of men who worked for rival corporate raiders, the Morettis. Molly Warner, the taller one, said, his voice oily. We know all about the Warner legacy. That's a lot of debt for one girl to carry. It would be a shame if those collectors became less patient. Molly froze, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. What do you want? The man pulled a small, sleek black USB drive from his pocket. It looked innocent, but she knew better. In this world, silicon was more lethal than lead. Mr. Romani is about to have a very important week. A merger that will cement his legacy. We just need you to be his invisible friend. Take this. Plug it into his private terminal in the executive lounge tomorrow night. Do this and your father's debts vanish. Every cent. You'll be free, Molly. Truly free for the first time in your life. He pressed the cold plastic into her palm. Molly looked at the drive, then at the man. The debt, the weight that had crushed her for 17 years. The reason she couldn't sleep, the reason her father was a memory of fire could be gone. All she had to do was betray the man who had dared to look her in the eyes. As they disappeared into the night, Molly stood in the rain, the USB drive burning a hole in her hand. The invisible girl was finally being seen. But the price of visibility was her soul. If this story touched your heart, please don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments with those who believe that destiny can change everything one day. Subscribe, because when destiny shifts, everything changes. The USB drive felt like a lead weight in Molly's pocket as she climbed the stairs to her apartment. That night, she didn't sleep. She sat on the edge of her Murphy bed, the small black device resting on the scarred wood of her nightstand. It represented everything she had ever dreamed of: an end to the phone calls, an end to the red-inked notices, an end to the ghost of her father's failures. She could move to the coast, buy a house with a garden, and never smell industrial degreaser again. But she kept seeing Gerardo's eyes. They weren't just cold. They were lonely. It was a look she knew intimately, the gaze of someone who had built a fortress to keep the world out, only to realize they'd trapped themselves inside. The next evening at the Gilded Cage, the air was thick with the scent of expensive tobacco and impending power moves. Gerardo was there, deep in conversation with his legal team. The merger of the century was only days away. Molly moved through the room, her heart a frantic rhythm in her chest. She saw the Moretti agents in the far corner, watching her with predatory expectation. She approached Gerardo's table. Her hands were steady, but her voice was a notch lower than usual. Mr. Romani, I need to clear your table. Completely. Gerardo looked up, his dark eyes narrowing. He sensed the shift in her energy. He waved his team away. What is it, Molly? Another lecture on my clumsiness? Molly didn't smile. She reached into her pocket, pulled out the USB drive, and placed it directly on the center of the mahogany table. The Morettis want me to destroy you, she said, her voice barely a whisper, but as sharp as a diamond. This contains a worm designed to frame you for corporate fraud. It would trigger the moment you hit execute on the merger documents. The silence that followed was suffocating. Gerardo didn't look at the drive. He looked at her. He saw the tremor she was trying so hard to hide, the exhaustion in her eyes, and the undeniable integrity that made her stand there and throw away her only chance at a debt-free life. Why tell me? Gerardo asked, his voice devoid of its usual bite. They offered you a way out, didn't they? I know who your father was, Molly. I know the numbers on those notices. Because my father died with his dignity intact, even if he died broke, Molly replied, her chin lifting. I won't let them turn me into a ghost of a different kind. I'm not a pawn, Mr. Romani. I'm a person. Gerardo stood up slowly. He picked up the drive, but his focus remained on her. For a man who had spent his life navigating betrayal, this act of radical honesty was more disarming than any hostile takeover. They'll come for you now, he said, and for the first time, there was genuine concern in his tone. You've made yourself a target for men who don't understand the word no. I've been a target my whole life, she shrugged, though her skin went cold at the thought. Not anymore, Gerardo declared. He signaled to his head of security, a silent man named Elias. Pack her things. She's coming with me. From this moment on, Molly Warner is under the protection of Romani Holdings. The transition was jarring. Within hours, Molly was whisked away from her cramped studio and into the stratosphere. Gerardo's penthouse was a cathedral of glass and steel, hovering 60 floors above the city. It was beautiful, sterile, and terrifyingly high. In the days that followed, the dynamic between them began to shift. Gerardo didn't treat her like a guest nor a servant. He treated her like a confidant. He moved her into a suite that was larger than her entire apartment building, filled with silks and soft lights, but she spent most of her time in his study. Watching him work, they spent long nights over tablets and legal briefs. But the conversations often drifted into the shadows of their pasts. One evening, as a storm battered the floor-to-ceiling windows, Gerardo sat by the fireplace, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. This time, he didn't drop it. My father didn't die in a fire, Gerardo said suddenly, staring into the flames. He died in a boardroom. Heart attack brought on by the very men I'm fighting now. He was too kind for this world, Molly. He thought a handshake meant something. I spent 15 years becoming the monster, so they could never do to me what they did to him. Molly sat on the rug across from him, her legs tucked under her. So you built a cage of gold, she whispered. But you're still fighting his war, aren't you? Gerardo looked at her, the firelight dancing in his dark eyes. And you? You're still paying for a fire you didn't start. He reached out, his fingers hesitating before gently touching the faint white scars on her hand. It wasn't a romantic gesture yet. It was a recognition of shared trauma. Two people, broken by the greed of others, finding a strange, quiet peace in the one place they never thought to look, each other's presence. I've spent my life making people disappear. Molly, Gerardo said, his voice thick with an emotion he rarely allowed himself to feel. But for the first time, I want to make someone stay. Molly felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the fireplace. For years, she had been the invisible girl, the ghost in the machine. But in this fortress of steel, under the gaze of the city's most feared man, she finally felt solid. She finally felt seen. But outside the glass walls, the Morettis were regrouping. Marco, Gerardo's cousin and the snake in the grass, was already weaving the next web. They had failed to buy Molly, so now they would try to break the foundation she was helping Gerardo build. As Molly drifted to sleep that night in the softest bed she'd ever known, she realized that the war wasn't over. It was just moving into the light. And this time, she wouldn't be watching from the sidelines. If this story touched your heart, please don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments with those who believe that destiny can change everything one day. Subscribe, because when destiny shifts, everything changes. The night of the Romani Aegis Gala arrived like a gilded execution. The grand ballroom of the Pier Hotel was a sea of black ties, silk gowns, and the sharp metallic scent of expensive ambition. For the world, this was the celebration of a merger that would redefine global tech. For Gerardo and Molly, it was a battlefield. Molly stood in front of the mirror in her suite, barely recognizing the woman looking back. She wore a gown of deep emerald silk that draped over her frame like liquid moonlight. The dress was elegant, but it wasn't a disguise. It was armor. Gerardo had given her a necklace of emeralds and diamonds that felt heavy against her throat, a reminder of the world she now inhabited. You look like you're going to war, Gerardo said from the doorway. He looked impeccable, his suit sharp enough to cut, but his eyes were restless. I've spent 17 years surviving in the shadows, Gerardo, Molly replied, adjusting the silk. A ballroom isn't that different from a back alley. The predators just have better tailors. He stepped closer, his hand finding hers. The roughness of her scars against his smooth palms was a grounding wire for both of them. Stay close to Elias. Marco is moving tonight. I can feel the air thinning. The gala was a whirlwind of false smiles and whispered threats. Marco Romani, Gerardo's cousin, was the picture of familial loyalty, laughing with board members while his eyes darted toward the server racks in the back of the hall. Molly watched him from the periphery. She didn't mingle. She observed. She used the skill she had perfected as a waitress, the ability to be present but unnoticed. Suddenly, the music died. Not a fade-out, but a digital slaughter. The giant screens displaying the merger graphics flickered to a harsh, blood-red glow. A lockdown protocol message flashed across the monitors. The doors to the ballroom hissed shut, magnetically sealed. Ladies and gentlemen, Marco's voice boomed over the speakers, amplified and distorted. It seems Romani Holdings is currently under investigation for massive capital flight and fraud. For your safety, the building is on lockdown until federal authorities arrive. Panic dalga yieldki. The board members began to shout, their phones useless as the signal jammers kicked in. Gerardo's face went pale. He reached for his tablet, but it was dead. He's bypassed the main server, Gerardo whispered, his voice tight. He's framing me in real time. If he uploads those forged documents to the federal portal while we're locked in here, it's over. I lose everything. The company, my freedom. You. Molly saw the opening. She saw the way the security teams were focused on the main stage and the locked exits. They were looking for men in suits. They weren't looking for the help. I can get to the executive suite, Molly whispered. No, it's too dangerous, Gerardo snapped. Marco has his own mercenaries in the halls. Gerardo, look at me, she said, grabbing his lapels. They don't see me. They never have. To them, I'm just a girl in a dress or a girl in a uniform. Let me be the ghost you need. Before he could protest, she slipped away. She didn't head for the main doors. She headed for the service pantry. In seconds, she had discarded her emerald gown in a linen closet, revealing a simple black waitress's vest and slacks. She had hidden underneath a backup plan she'd learned from a life of always. Needing an exit, she grabbed a tray of half-empty champagne glasses and walked out into the guarded corridor. The mercenaries were there, armed with tasers and high-end tech, patrolling the halls. Molly lowered her head, slumped her shoulders, and moved with the hurried, slightly frantic energy of a panicked servant. She walked right past two guards. They didn't even blink. To them, she was part of the architecture, a piece of furniture to be ignored. She reached the executive suite, her heart thundering against her ribs. The door was ajar. Inside, she heard Marco's voice, triumphant and venomous. It's done, Marco was saying into a burner phone. The upload is at 90%. By the time the police break those doors down, Gerardo will be the most hated man in New York. The board will vote me in by morning. He thought he could bring a gutter girl into this house and stay clean. I'll burn them both. Molly didn't breathe. She leaned against the mahogany doorframe, her phone gripped in her hand. She wasn't just listening. She was recording. She captured the sound of the keyboard clicks, the confession of the forgery, and the cold laugh of a man who thought he had already won. But then, a floorboard creaked. Marco spun around. His eyes landed on Molly, the invisible girl standing in the shadows. For a second, his smug expression wavered. You, he hissed. The little stray. Not a stray, Marco, Molly said, her voice echoing with a strength she had found in the fire. A witness. He lunged for her, but Molly was faster. She didn't fight him. She didn't have to. She threw the heavy silver tray at his feet, the shattering glass creating the distraction she needed. She bolted back into the service hallway, the recording saved, her lungs burning. She slid back into the ballroom through the kitchen vents just as the digital lockdown reached its climax. She found Gerardo in the center of the chaos, standing like a statue in a storm. She pressed the phone into his hand. I have him, she breathed, her face smudged with dust, but her eyes blazing. I have everything. Gerardo looked at the screen, then at her. The fear that had gripped him for the last hour vanished, replaced by a fierce, protective pride. The counterstrike was ready. But as the sirens finally wailed outside, Molly felt the weight of the evening crashing down. She had saved the king, but the cost of the war was yet to be paid. If this story touched your heart, please don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. With those who believe that destiny can change everything one day. Subscribe, because when destiny shifts, everything changes.